Hello, friends, and welcome to Post-Mormon Parenting. I'm Rachel, and today we have a very special guest on the show. Her name is Gretchen. She's a mom from Utah, and she resigned from the church earlier this year. She has such great stories and fascinating experiences and a lot of really, really insightful things and wisdom that she's gained since her faith transition and her faith journey. And I'm so excited that she's on the show here with us today and can share her story with us. So Gretchen, why don't you say hello and can you introduce yourself a little bit for us?
Sure, thanks. I'm excited to be here. This is my first experience. I'm like, I don't know where to look. First podcast. Grew up in Davis County. I'm from Clearfield. I'm the oldest of four. Got three younger brothers. Grew up Mormon. My dad is from pioneer stock, and my mom's family is a convert. My dad is more of a we call him in Davis County Jack Mormons. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but and my mom, Jack Mormon is like, he swears. I mean, he's
say, yeah,
those are in the scriptures. We use those all the time, and there's a lot of people in Davis County like that. It wasn't just him, but So that type of Mormonism where one side is like, it's okay. Like that wasn't swearing, growing up, those words were normal. And, but my mom was more like the Relief Society president, did everything. And he never hardly went to church. Jack Mormons like believe in it, but they're not active. So he rarely went to church. If he did go to sacrament with us, he never went to Sunday school or classes. He'd just wander around. I don't know what he did for 2 hours, but just wander around. And then I went to high school and was really competitive in speech and debate and liked doing stuff like that. And eventually went to BYU. And we have 8 kids. My husband and I have been married for coming up on 26 years. So,
wow.
And I just resigned from the LDS church in March of this year, 2020. Right? In fact, 2 days before COVID, everything hit. And then it was interesting timing.
Yeah.
My world went black. Seriously. I was like, what did I do?
Oh, yikes. That's a good way to cut off your entire social network. All at once.
I've never used social media. So I ghost my kids, but I've never personally. So I actually joined Facebook for post-Mormon support.
That's awesome.
That's how I got on Facebook. So
that's fantastic. And that's how we met, was through Facebook and me reading your amazing things that you've written there. When you're active believing Mormon, as you and I know, it's really, really difficult to see someone leave the church, to see anyone who would ever want to leave. And it's tempting to say, oh, they must have just been really casual in their discipleship and casual in their scripture study. And you wrote some really, really great words about this. Can you share what your experience was like?
A few years ago in General Conference, one of the talks was on careful versus casual. And it was basically saying if you're careful in the church, you're not going to leave. And if you're casual, you are. As to your covenants. Anyway, that was the last Relief Society that I attended last year. And I had been struggling with this for 8 years. I've been trying to stay in, look at things symbolically. And everything with my kids, it just got worse and worse. And it was kind of a wake-up call because I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't describe me at all. You look up Gretchen in the dictionary, there's not a casual bone in my body. And not relating to Mormonism either. Like, as a person, as I'm passionate about everything I do. I homeschooled my kids starting in 1998, and I used a 4-year program that rotated the church manuals like Book of Mormon, Old Testament, New Testament, DNC, with the Utah State curriculum. A Mormon mom came up with it, and I loved it. I rotated through it for 16 years. I taught all of my kids how to read, from Grant Von Harrison's reading through the Book of Mormon. He says that it's the most phonetically correct book. And so all my kids, the first book they learned to read was the Book of Mormon. Like, that's how, and I taught aerobics. I still teach yoga, but I used to teach step and kickboxing and yoga and everything. And for the 12 years that I taught, I never wore a tank top because I didn't want to take off my garments to exercise, even if it was sweaty, hot and sweaty. I was very committed to wearing my garments, not because it was like I'm better than you, but I really took my temple covenant seriously, you know, and I really took it seriously that you should never take them off. And so exercise wasn't like, I was like, there's no reason I can't wear a t-shirt and long pants to even to spin classes.
Same. I was like always wearing them if possible.
Yes. So, and then my husband and I are the type of people that we always read the lesson before Sunday school on Saturday. So we read the entire lesson, and we read just, we like to read just together for dates and stuff. And so we read when we were dating. He was a super uber, like just barely returned from his mission. His siblings would tease him saying people come home from the mission and are normal, and he didn't ever get normal. He just still wanted to keep learning. And because I had been raised more Davis County Jack Mormon, this was like, and my dad would always make fun of the leaders and the bishops and stuff. And he was like, no, you don't do that. And I was really attracted to that because I was like, oh, this is how I want to raise my future children and my family, you know. So we read all the standard works together along with, I don't know if you remember those old BYU manuals that would, every section, maybe you're too young. So there used to be a BYU manual you could get for Book of Mormon, one for Old Testament, one for New Testament. They probably still have them. And you reading all the scholars, the LDS scholars stuff. So we did that like probably 4 times for all of the standard works.
Wow.
And eventually we branched out, but I mean, there's nothing casual about the way I lived Mormonism, what I believed, even just at BYU, before I got married, I took Teachings of the Living Prophets. And one of the big things they hammer home, we read every conference talk there was on having kids. And all the conference talks at the time, and then now today they say, you just listen to the leader of the current time. It wasn't like that. 20 years ago, it was like we read every prophet back for like 3 or 4 prophets. Anyway, it was always like, there's never anything you should put off having kids for. You know, after you get married, you should have kids. And so I had kids fast and early because the prophet told me to. And I really did feel like, and it's still hard for me now as a post-Mormon to know what was from me and what was from what I learned since I was 3. I don't really know, because I really do love being a mom. And I really did feel like the commandment, multiply and replenish the earth, like I felt that deeply. I feel like that's my job. I'm supposed to do that. But, you know, in hindsight, now that I look at, I think, man, I had my first baby when I was 21, and science, your brain's not even done developing until 25. So like, I'm like, I kind of wish I would have known that and like not been listening to a prophet. That, you know, not that I wouldn't, I mean, want to have any of my kids, because then I wouldn't have had 8, but that I'm just giving you a context in the, not being casual. I had all those kids because I thought I was like living the highest law of Mormonism.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as you have your kids, you're homeschooling them, you're teaching them from the scriptures every single day. I mean, I know like in my family, it was such a struggle to do like family scripture time maybe once a week. But it sounds like you guys had tons of scripture time like on a regular daily basis with your kids. And then
when we were doing ancient history. Right, yeah. When we were doing ancient history, we're pulling in the stories from the Old Testament because I thought they were real. And when we're doing Book of Mormon, that's the same time as a lot of the civil, you know, in the United States stuff. And so we would like, well, this is the time Joseph Smith was doing this, and this is what's going on in the world, or in the United States, more studying U.S. history. And so we interwove everything for sure.
Your kids must have been like scholars growing up. They must have like blown all their like classmates out of the water in like Sunday school and seminary and everything. I wonder if that got annoying for their
my older kids. My middle kids, I got tired. So my middle kids, it was part and part. My younger kids are all homeschooled again, my 2 little girls. But for sure, I had 2 like Sterling Scholar finalists, and they were in family and home science and family sciences because that's like, you know, was their thing. But for sure, it was fun. My favorite thing that we did was one year we studied a U.S. history, but we did it all through stories of our family history. And so we had this big family tree that I had up in our, we don't live in that house anymore, but so we would, I went and interviewed my grandparents that were still alive about their war stories and stuff. And so we, instead of reading books, we read, this is what my grandpa or my great grandpa did in the war when Pearl Harbor happened or whatever.
Wow.
Anyway. But yeah,
that must have been really cool, like making it so much more real for them. Like, this is real people and real stories.
Yeah, they probably don't remember any of it. It was fun for me. I'm learning. I didn't know that now. I thought everything I ever teach my kids, they'll always remember it. Now I realize, okay, anything before 10, they don't really remember that.
I'm going to keep that in mind.
I don't know if I'd change anything, but maybe I'd take it less seriously. Now I know. You get older and you start taking things less seriously, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like how my parents did. I was toward the end of a very large family, a little bigger than yours. And and I was like one of the last ones. My parents were so different parenting me than my
older girl. I have 2 girls at the beginning and 2 girls at the end. My older girls call my babies my sugar babies because I never let them have sugar, and we were way more healthy back then. So
oh yeah,
now I'm like, you want some candy? I don't care what you want. As long as you just leave me alone for a minute.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so going through all of it, like totally not casual at all, really, really committed. Honestly, Gretchen, you're like one of the most committed people that I've ever met when it comes to gospel study and devoting hours and hours and hours and curriculums around it. So not just like a Sunday worship or a casual, lightly snacking on the scriptures, but like really feasting on the scriptures and all the words that we have, right?
Right.
So once you finally did start discovering some new information, you said about Joseph Smith was kind of like where you first started like, wait a second, this is not the story that I was taught, but you started discovering information. You found out this was legit, factual information. How did that affect your Sunday school attendance and Relief Society attendance? And what was that like for you?
So it was really difficult because I think that's the difference between someone who stays Mormon with all the incongruencies and someone who leaves this is my opinion, but it's, if you're willing to say, oh, there could be something wrong here, then you eventually are probably going to go down the rabbit hole. Or if you're like, you know what, no matter what, my testimony is so strong, no matter what anybody tells me, I'm never going to believe anything else, then you'll probably never believe anything else because that's your confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. But polygamy had always bothered me, and I'd always been taught that, you know, well, it's mostly anti-Mormon lies, and yeah, he had wives, but it wasn't like what you think, and it was commanded by God, and it was a good thing. Anyway, and so I'd heard some podcasts, read some things, and I always was very careful to study only LDS scholarship, you know, because you're taught in the church, don't read anything anti, that affect your testimony.
Yeah.
So when Brian
Hales, biased, you know, so
yeah, and they're biased.
Out of context.
Right. So when Brian Hales came out with, it's a trilogy, there's 3 books on polygamy, and he had access to the church archives, and he just goes through every wife, and he's the church apologist. So at the end of every chapter, he says, this is what I think this was. But like at the end of every chapter, I was like, this is BS. Like, and I thought my husband was going to read it after me. He never did, but I was leaving things. If you ever do this to me, I'm going to do to you. But the first story, which I had heard was an anti-Mormon lie, was that the reason Joseph did it was an angel with a drawn sword came and told him, if you don't practice polygamy, I'm going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And my immediate gut reaction was just like, but that's against the church. They tell you the reason you came to get a body was for free agency. And they say Christ's plan was free agency. He's willing to die for us. And Satan's plan is a force. So I'm like, that angel, I came up with 3 conclusions after reading. Number 1, Joseph was deceived. Number 2, he's a slime ball. And that was the one I was leaning toward after I read all 30 of the wives' stories, because a lot of it was done behind Emma's back with young girls. Just the circumstances surrounding it was like, I'm sorry, no God's going to command that. Or 3, God commanded it. And I was like, even if it's 3, I don't want to have anything to do with that type of a God. Like, seriously, like there's no context in any world where that would be okay with me. Or if, like he, you know, tried to get young girls to marry him, and he would tell the family, this is the only way you can be sealed in the temple. It's like if some 40-year-old man came to my door and told me that, you know, I'm the prophet, and if your 14-year-old doesn't marry me, you're not gonna, your whole family's gonna be doomed. I'd be like, get the hell off my porch and call the police. Like, you know, I'm like, why are we not talking about this? Especially when it's like factual LDS. And so this was before all the essays came out, by the way. So I think the breaking point for me was one of the years when we were studying in gospel doctrine, church history. And at the end of Brian Hill's book, he basically lays out the martyrdoms mostly because of the secret practice of polygamy. It's why the printing press was destroyed. And what he printed, I did a paper in BYU. It was true. Like he was literally printing quoted from the DNC, which hadn't been released. We have it now, DNC 132, the part on polygamy. He's quoting that, and he was saying Joseph Smith secretly married a girl that's in their care, which he had. So Joseph's burning this, and people are like, it's vigilante justice. He was killed because of the polygamy. It wasn't because of martyrdom. So I didn't have a problem with any of that information. My problem was I'm sitting in gospel doctrine, and they're retelling the story of he's done nothing more than save Jesus Christ in his martyrdom. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he's a sexual pervert at least. Like, and he didn't die because of that. And we know this. Like, it's in the LDS scholars' books. Like, maybe you could give him a little bit of martyrdom if you really wanted to be an apologist, which I think Brian Hills does, but I'm not giving him any. And we are definitely leaving out. Like the printing press, they went on and on about how bad William Laws was and how if you leave the church, you can never leave it alone and all that stuff. And I'm just like, I had to leave. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't sit through lessons where they're teaching mistruths, or not only leaving out truths, but they're teaching mistruths. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a problem with that, but I couldn't raise my hand and talk about it. Like, as soon as I raise my hand and say, hey, this isn't right, I'm going to either cause a ruckus in class, I'm going to lose my temple recommend, people are going to not like me. I'm like, what do you do? Like, when we moved into this neighborhood, there were only 2 non-members, and we replaced one of them.
Wow.
And now we have some more diversity, 20 years. I've been here for 20 years. So I quit going, and I'm having, every time I have a baby, I always use the excuse of I got to stay home with the baby. So I always just use the baby excuse. Then I'm in the nursery. That's the most awesome excuse ever. I was in the nursery for years. But it went on for a long time, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do Sunday school. So I would do Relief Society from time to time, but I quit going to Sunday school.
Wow. So you tried to make it work. You tried to sit there, but you realized this is not doing anything for me. This is too painful to listen to, and I can't just sit here and be quiet anymore and not be able to.
Right. And I didn't understand the term cognitive dissonance at the time, but now cognitive dissonance is when your brain's going one direction and your heart's going another. Mm-hmm. And I understand now that that's what was happening to me. My brain is saying, this is crazy, but my heart still wanted to be part of the community. My heart still was like, but this is so good for my kids. This is how I keep them from having sex. This is how I keep them from doing drugs. I've taught them their whole lives. They want to go on missions. I can't pull out now. This is my whole life. These are my people. I love, this is my tribe, mm-hmm. But I can't sit there and listen to misinformation or, and not every lesson was like that, but it just got to the point where I couldn't go anymore.
Yeah. And I think especially like the more you start learning about things like that, about Joseph Smith, and then it's like, what's next? Right.
Yeah.
And you don't just learn about one thing and then that's it for the rest of your life. Right. Like you start learning about more and more and more and more and more. This tapestry of the narrative that you've been given starts unraveling little by little. And
right. And I would say, exactly. Yeah. That's what, and I just let the Joseph Smith, put him on my shelf, let it slide. I was like, you know what? That was then. We don't practice it now. Our leaders today are great. They're wonderful. They're not probably ever going to do that. By their fruits you shall know them, So I start studying the Book of Mormon and find out it's not literal. Like, and everybody's known this for 100 years.
Yeah.
Even inside the leaders. And I didn't find that out till I resigned. The level of deceit at the leadership level, I didn't know that until after I resigned and joined so much post-Mormon stuff and learned, because I was such a true believing Mormon. I never read anything like that. But then you get to the Book of Abraham and you're like, they're trying to say, well, it's not a translation, it's a revelation. I'm like, but I grew up with it being a translation. And I took Book of Abraham, like at BYU. I've taken, like, that's not the way they taught it. And they're not, it's okay that, I don't have a problem with the church being wrong. It's just, you can start seeing this pattern of not telling the truth and then slowly changing it to the truth, but acting like you always told the truth the whole time, which I had a problem with. And then, I don't know if you heard that John DeLynn one where the, Joseph Smith translation of the Bible, that's mostly plagiarized from Adam Clark. About 70%. There's a BYU student, and they tried to bury that. and just the church, even just the history of Joseph's life, his treasure digging and the stone in the hat and type of person that he was. Anyway, it's not just Joseph Smith, but it's all of church history. It's the keystone of our religion, the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham, all the Bible stuff. And yeah, just what I did for a long time, I just decided, this is a path, and I'm going to willingly choose this path, but I'm just going to look at it symbolically. So I was like, I've taught all my kids how to read from this book. I love this book. There's still a lot of great stuff in it. I'm starting to notice the sexism, which I hadn't noticed before. I'm starting to notice the racism. We'll just skip those parts, or we'll read them, and I can teach my kids just like you. I mean, when we studied India, we studied the Bhagavad Gita. When we, in homeschool, I studied so many scriptural texts. Most of the other scriptural texts outside of Christianity are symbolic. And we did Waldorf school. We had a Waldorf co-op, and that's all like myths and stories to teach lessons. So I'm like, you know what? This is me. Book of Mormon's not literal. Bible's not literal. We can just look at this all symbolically. This will work out great. I can still be Mormon. I can look at it symbolically. And I did that for a long time, even like in my bishop interviews. They're saying, do you believe in this? And in my mind, I'm like, yes, but I'm like translating it.
Right.
The way I believe it. But just the inability to have a voice in Sunday school, to have a voice in Relief Society, to have a voice even with my own children, because I'm saying things by this point to them, like, Mormonism isn't the only path. There's other paths. Remember, when you go to church, you're hearing their side of the story. And I would say things at home like, when you have an argument with your sibling, your side of the story is going to be different than theirs. Well, it's the same when you go to Mormon and you listen to church, and you listen to the lesson. It's going to be skewed because the church wrote the manual. So just little things like that, so I didn't feel like I was lying, but not coming out saying. And I don't even think it was this all happened over 8 years, so 7, almost 8 years. So I really believe, now that I've studied psychology and looking back, I think there was a really, really deep brainwashing going. My brain. Very brainwashed. And with that cognitive dissonance, I was just, what way can I resolve this cognitive dissonance that's not leaving? And I just think my brain and my heart went through every way I possibly could. It was like, well, I'll look at everything symbolic. Well, maybe no one will notice I'm not at Sunday school. I just won't say anything. But when I'm at home, I'll teach my kids what I think. And then I went through these phases of just doing everything I could to stay Mormon because I loved it so much, But then when the LGBTQ thing came out, and we had a daughter whose best friend was gay, and we didn't know that at the time, but just it really was offensive to her. And I did what I always do, which is research. And when I realized that it's mostly how much testosterone a mother produces in pregnancy that affects you could be heterosexual or homosexual, or it could make, all these different things, which we've always been taught is a choice. And it wasn't. Yeah. And I see my prophet, my leaders in today's age doing what they did to the women I felt in polygamy. What they did to the blacks when I researched blacks in the priesthood. I'm like, holy shit, it's happening here and now. And with people that I follow and trust. What do I do with this? And then really, I think it depends. Mormonism's different in the culture that you're in. I know I have one child that lives on the East Coast, and it's like they're like, yeah, that's a policy. We know it's wrong. And they talk about it openly. You can't say that in my Sunday school class. Like, it's like, this is the doctrine. This is the policy, And so it was like, now I lost my voice, like, on everything. And it took me a while to understand, because I was a secretary in the Family Sciences Department at BYU when I went to BYU. And I still remember when Prop 8 came out. It was actually before Prop 8, sorry. When Hawaii was legalizing same-sex marriage, and the director there was like, the first presidency called and said, we want you to get all the evidence on how same-sex marriage is bad. And at that time, I thought it was bad too, because that's what I'd been taught. And I'm like, yeah, let's find out. We need to stop this. This is so bad. And so I was involved with just helping coordinate. And I know he asked all the professors, whatever you have, give it to me. I got to get it to the brethren. And then I have a sibling who was in California during the Prop 8. And so I know the church's involvement in fighting it. And so when it starts dawning on me that actually that's not a choice, this is science, and then watching them not change, and then I can't share all the details of what I know, but I know that they knew it too, the 12, because they did their own research projects, which they buried.
That they knew that it was not a choice.
They knew it was science.
Born that way.
And I mean, there was just a part of me that once I realized the leaders of the church today weren't who I thought they were, and the money and where it was going, and especially in those things. I mean, they're even using tithing money not just against same-sex marriage, but against equal rights for them in the workforce right now. I mean, it was just like, man, could anything else fall down that hasn't already fallen? So yeah, that was hard. And then in the middle of this, I had my first go on a mission. She went on a mission at the very beginning, the Joseph Smith stuff. And then my third child went on a mission when I pretty much knew everything was a joke.
And did you try to say anything before your third child went on a mission? Like, listen, there's problems with the truth claims. You need to know before you go. Or did you like, no, I can't rock that boat right now. They're about to go on a mission.
I didn't with my first, because I actually wasn't sure. I was like, well, maybe this is just Joseph Smith thing and everything else is fine. But with my second missionary, I did have a conversation with him where I said, a lot of the things they teach aren't true. And when you teach that first vision story, he already knew that there's 4 versions. You're only going to be teaching part of the truth. So just remember that you're there and you're a representative of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But, when you come home, if you learn other things, just things like that. And I still remember he was like, well, if that's a problem, we should just write to the prophet about it. That was
Aww.
He was like, have you written a letter to the prophet and told him about these things? I'm like, I think he already knows, and I don't think that's anything.
That's so sweet. Yeah.
But yeah, there were other issues leading up to his mission too. Like he was in the care of a therapist. He had some pretty severe insomnia and some anxiety. And I told the bishop to put on there too, which he said he did, that he shouldn't go foreign, and he got called foreign. So I actually fought his call quite a bit. Tried to talk him out of it. But he was like, this is where the prophet called me. I'm going to go where the prophet called me. And in my mind, I was like, the prophet doesn't know you. You can't even go down the street to the grocery store and not lose your driver's license. Like, this is a bad idea. You're going to get on an airplane by yourself, because they don't put you with anybody. You go straight. He was called to Brazil. You go straight to the Brazil MTC. There's no English transition. He's never flown on an airplane by himself. And he's so ADD scatterbrained. I was like, this is going to be a disaster. And he doesn't speak the language. And he's a really hard worker, but he's a slow learner. So I was like, he's not just going to pick up a language. And anyway, just all the details of that, I just fought it. And in hindsight, I wish I just wouldn't have helped him with his passport. Then he wouldn't have been able to go. I was like, that would have been a sneaky thing to do. Why wasn't I smart enough to do that? He came home early 4 months later. And yeah, I have a huge regret I don't know that it would have changed anything if I'd said more, but I wish I would have said, I think this is all bullshit, just so you know.
Yeah.
I wish I said that. But and he wishes I would have said that now too. He's like, he came home and while he was waiting to get back into BYU, did the institute classes at UVU and did the foundations class. And so they're teaching a lot of this stuff now. They're teaching the polygamy. They're teaching it. So that I think they're trying to inoculate the next generation. And he was,
so they don't get blindsided and then just leave.
And like at the MTC at Brazil, when he said, hey, what do I do if someone asks me about the 4 versions of the first vision? They're like, we don't talk about that here. You don't ever talk about that. And he got in trouble for asking about it.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like that. It's the institutional problem where they're not teaching in Sunday school and Relief Society. Nobody can talk about it. So only the people who are intellectuals and well-researched know about it, or who went to college or went to BYU with the new classes. And then you get to this this Brazilian MTC run by the Brazilians. They've never even heard of it. They think it's anti-Mormon still, because the church has been so inconsistent with sharing it globally.
Yeah. And like you sound like the crazy person, like if you're the one to speak up in Sunday school or Relief Society, or to your mission president or to your investigators or whoever, you get to sound like the crazy person and not be taken seriously at all. So yeah, it's another way of, it's so malicious, I think, that control over you, and it's very intentional as well.
Yeah, I think it's called double speak in psychology. Well, technically we never said you couldn't teach this. So
yeah.
But yeah, so that actually caused him, he had some, at the MTC, some pretty, I would say, verbally and abusive experiences, and emotionally, from the MTC president, and some of his experiences there. He had some pretty traumatic experiences out in the field, but he didn't come back the same. Mm-hmm. And his therapist said his mental break is so severe, like you need to suffer the death of your child, because who left, he'll never come back. He'll never be the same. And
I'm so sorry.
Whether that's true or not, I'm still fighting that.
Yeah.
So whether that's true or not, he's really, it's been a year now. Has it been longer than a year and a half? And he still struggles. He's doing a lot better, but he came back to the same problem, because he had deferred for BYU and BYU Idaho. But he has now this shelf broken at the Institute, but our bishop in our neighborhood doesn't know all this stuff. And he starts talking about it with him in his interviews. And the bishop said, I just asked him about this. I'm going to write down what he said the bishop said. I was like, the bishop said that to you and you didn't tell me? Something about how I'm the leader in Zion. You can't say that. Oh
my gosh.
And I don't know, he was quoting something, I don't know, but the problem, the shelf break and the leaders, the bishop interviews were like pushing him farther and farther over the top after he got home, to the point where I was like, okay, no more bishop interviews. This kid already has PTSD. He probably had a low-lying mood disorder that we didn't know about before. He's going back and forth between mania and depression. You guys can't talk to him. Like, cause and he can't keep his mouth shut, the cute kid. He's like, did you know this, and this, and this? And I would tell him, I'd say, if you're going to go talk to the bishop, straight up lie. Don't say what you believe. Don't say what you know, because they can't be trusted. And he didn't. And he ended up being suicidal over a lot of the stuff that he learned, and posting something pretty rude against the prophet. Mm-hmm. And got his temple recommend taken away. And he didn't understand. He thought in his cute little mind that meant he couldn't go to BYU. So after he has this terrible break, and I already, at this point, we skipped some stuff, but I don't let my kids have one-on-one interviews with bishops anymore. And then I included him, even though he's adult. I was like, you don't ever interview my kid. Like, just don't do it.
I think that's such a good point to, I think we focus so much about like the sexual perversions in the interviews and how dangerous that can be for sexual predators alone behind closed doors with people. But I think you make such a good point too. Like, even for somebody who is maybe emotionally fragile or mentally fragile, or like, and not to say that there's any shame or anything about that. Like, we all go through those ups and downs in our lives. We all have times when we are more vulnerable and fragile than other times, right? But if you're in a state like that and you meet behind closed doors with a person who is supposed to be your moral authority and tells you all the things that are best for you in your life, because God, he's receiving revelation straight from God for you because you're in his stewardship, why, yes, sir, I will do everything that you say, and I'll believe everything that you say, and I will take on any chastisement and rebuke from you and internalize all of that shame that you're putting onto me. It's so harmful and so damaging. So I'm glad that you brought up
Correct.
that experience.
We really I love this man, so I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. He's a great person, and I've told him this to his face. He doesn't have any mental health training. I'm like, you don't have the training to talk with my kid. Why not? You just don't have it. And part of my son's PTSD was the MTC experience was, they said, you are here, you're full obedience. No questions allowed. You are not allowed to disobey. You are not allowed to disagree with us. Like, and so he was already coming back from this just like military, and it traumatized him to another interview where it's like, wait a minute, you think Brigham Young said that? Well, what is your source? You're not allowed. I'm the one that gets it. And he's like, and it just threw him over every time he talked to a bishop. So I was like, no more of this. We're not doing this anymore. And then just a few days before he moved out for BU, I found out that this bishop had interviewed my son like 2 more times. And I was really mad because I guess with the temple recommend, we didn't know his temple recommend got cold, but he found out it did, and he thought that meant he couldn't go to BYU. He thought, if I don't have a temple recommend, I can't be a student. So he called the bishop and made an interview appointment with him, not telling me, knowing that I would freak out about it. And it was on his second round.
But the bishop knew you wouldn't be okay with that.
Yes, he did know that. I'll tell you what I said in a minute. I don't think you'll want to keep it on the recording. Okay. But anyway, I found out about it because then he was like, he moved in to Heritage Halls on Monday. He was like, but I got to come back Tuesday to meet with the stake president. I'm like, what for? They're not allowed to be meeting with you. He's like, because don't worry about it, Mom. I'm taking care of it. And so I got it out of him that he was renewing his temple recommend because he thought that was the only way he could go to BYU. I'm like, that doesn't have anything to do with BYU. Anyway, so I called the bishop and this is what I said. I said, what the did you not understand when I said, stay the hell away from my son? What the did you not understand? And I probably used the F word for 30 minutes. And I still don't feel bad about it. And I feel bad that I don't feel bad about it. But I still don't feel bad about it. Because I'm like, I explained to you his situation. And he's like, but he came to me. I'm like, because you took away his temple recommend when he was suicidal. And he said, and this still makes me mad, but he said this probably to me 10 times. He goes, it's my job in the handbook to protect the good name of the church. He kept saying that. I'm sorry, I had to do it. And I said, I'm fine that you did it, but just so you know, it's my job to protect my son. And it's the church's fault. And this is the analogy I gave him. I said, look, it's like my son was standing on a cliff when he went on his mission. And he's there of his own free will to help the church out. He's looked forward to this his whole life. He's using his own money, his own time. And while he's on this cliff, the church, the leaders, the MTC president, some of the teachers, some of the people there pushed him off the cliff. He's falling. While he's falling, he's like, the prophet's a piece of this, and this isn't true, and I can't believe it. And he's saying these things in a public post, but he's not even mentally stable. I said, you want to punish him via temple recommend? I said, you're the aggressor. You represent the church. You represent the same institution that he was falling. They pushed him. That's what I said. Anyway, so he wanted to meet with me in person, and I was like, no, if you come over right now, I'll probably kill you. Stay away from me. And don't ever interview my son again. And in his defense, they reinstated his recommend, and he went off to BYU. And I thought, okay, no more. How many times? Because we've had problems with other kids with bishop interviews too. And so I was like, how many times do I have to say this? So I'm thinking, great. Now he goes to BYU school, so you have to have bishop interviews to go to BYU school. So I'm like, I'm going to have to call the bishop there and have a conversation. He moves in on Thursday. Church isn't even. It's barely over. And he calls home hysterical because the bishop had called him in for an interview at BYU. And I was like, why did you go? Why didn't you say, call my mom? He's like, because that'd be embarrassing. Yeah. But I guess he got up on Boris' testimony and basically said, I'm struggling. I don't know that Joseph Smith was a prophet in his testimony to the entire world. Aww. He doesn't have the silent, whatever you want to call it. And I'm struggling with the Book of Mormon. So the bishop calls him in, and basically he said, he just really chastises me, like, look, you just need to know that I know that it's true. And you don't need to have all these questions. It's the same pattern. He has it at the MTC. He has it at the home ward bishop. And just kind of laid into him. And he said, my son said, he said inappropriate things like, you should never have sex outside of marriage. If you do, you can repent of it, but you can never you take away that girl's virtue, she'll never give it back. She will never be able to be whole again. Oh my God. And just the type of advice he was giving him, and just like, you need to go to the temple. And then it led to, so I don't know if you're familiar with mania, but he's just barely stabilized to get to BYU. So that's why I'm like, no bishop interviews, nobody push him over the edge. He's like just one step away from. Anyway, and this started a round of mania where he was so worried that he thought the bishop's going to pull my classes because I was at BYU. The bishop's going to, he was just so worried. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with this bishop. He did say some inappropriate questions, but he doesn't have any mental health training. It's the church's fault. I don't blame any of these bishops. I blame the institution because they don't train. They have all this money. They don't train their leaders. There should be some type of at least pastoral training. But then his roommates would be like, you want to go to the temple? And he's like, no, well, you want to know the history of the temple? And they're like, you're reading anti-Mormon stuff. He's like, no, stuff's true. And he didn't want to go. And so then he was paranoid about his roommates ratting him out. So just started this cycle where he ended up having to be hospitalized. We didn't know where he was for a few days. He was so worried that the bishop would find out that he was feeling suicidal again, that they'd kick him out. It was just this overwhelming fear. So,
and this is all during his freshman year at BYU. It's all during his freshman year.
He did 2 semesters of school before his mission.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. Yeah. So
that was this is the child that was a requirement. I was like, you have to show me you can make it for 2 semesters without having any problems. And he did. He was fine. But so this is his first semester back at BYU. So he came home, regrouped, got a bunch more therapy, decided, well, I'm going to go to BYU Idaho instead, because he had deferred both places. He had done a semester at BYU Provo and went at BYU Idaho before his mission. Mm-hmm. So he goes there, and I contact that bishop before he even moves in. And he was really great. He never taught. He's like never taught, and he had great roommates, but he just wasn't. He wanted to do it, but he wasn't ready. So he came home, re-signed up for everything online. Ironically, then COVID started and everything was online anyway. So,
Yay!
Yeah, and at this point, I was just like, get him the hell out of church schools. He can't keep his mouth shut. And so I was like, if you do 14 more credits, you have your associates, and then you can go anywhere else. Like, so just like, and we had tried him to go from BYU to UVU, but they didn't take any of he would have had to start over on generals, and he only had 2 general education classes left if he stayed in the BYU program. Mm-hmm. So he did that online, and that was fine. And he could wear a beard because it was all online, and he could do whatever he wanted. Now he's at UVU, and he says the bishops there are a lot more, it's fun for him because they don't have any clout over him. So he says, I'll say, hey, can I have an interview with you? And I just say, what is it that you believe? Oh, interesting. This is what I believe. But they can't tell me I have to believe. And he's like in a really great place where he's like, I learned that my connection to God and Christ, he's still Christian, I'm not, but gets to be direct. And I love hearing what the bishop has to say, but I don't have to agree with it. And
oh my gosh.
And so he's kind of I would say a nuance. He calls himself an intellectual Mormon, not a cultural Mormon. That's what, if you were to ask him, because he's like, I know all the history, and I talk about it if I want to. And ironically, right before I resigned in March of 2020, the church historian came and talked at UVU and went over all these issues and was like, look, we're not hiding it anymore. It's all in LDS record. And he answered, my son said, is there any historical, any way that we can say that the Book of Mormon is historical? And the historian said no. And I have it all recorded. He went through everything.
That's so great.
Everything in my resignation letter he acknowledged. But he acknowledged it with the fact that, look, we're being open now. Yeah, we used to not be, but now we are. But I was like, I wish I could have been there, because I would have raised my hand and said, when do you talk about it in Sunday school? When do you talk about relief study? When do you talk about young men's? When do you talk about young men's? When are you going to talk about it in conference? 8 hours of conference twice a year. That's what transparency would be to me. Throwing it on a website and then throwing people like me who's intellectual and can't talk about it under the bus is not transparency. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, with that particular child, he's really enjoying his Mormon experience right now just because he feels like he has a voice. He likes to go to church in regular clothes. He wears a cross.
Wow.
So, and
he's
this is
bold. He's gutsy. Wow.
So, and I've really had to teach him, especially on the sexual questions. I'm like, so they, if you ever do want to go to the temple and you want to get married in the temple, you will have to, they will have clout over you if you decide to stay Mormon. So he understands that, and we practice. I'm like, what if they, beyond saying, do you live the law of chastity, what if he starts asking you about specific questions that you don't feel appropriate? And we practice, and he's like, I will say I did not give you permission to ask me that. Move on.
Oh,
so I'm like, because that's my biggest concern with, I've got TBM kids, I have nuance kids, I have post-Mormon kids, we have everything in between, but I just want them to learn, if they decide to stay Mormon, what's healthy and what's not healthy, and to avoid the unhealthy, which I resigned because I don't feel like you can stay Mormon and avoid it all, but at least in the best way possible. So I think he's in a good place.
I'm so glad that he's doing so much better and in such a better place. Let's talk about your other kids. Tell us, are your other kids still attending? Did you give them a choice? Like, can you tell us about the age range of your kids and like who gets to have a choice on, like, you have to go to church, you can't go to church, or what that looks like in your family among your 8 kids?
Sure. So again, it's evolved over that 8 years. So I'll start back. Our oldest right now is 24 and our youngest is 5. Okay. And my oldest served a mission in Russia, loved it. She loves Mormonism. She lives East Coast, and she feels like she can do more. She knows about the Joseph Smith stuff now. She does think I'm very anti. We mostly can't talk about church together, but
She's got a mom who uses the F word, so like, yeah, you must
well,
be anti.
But yeah, but I've sworn, like I think I told you that I'm from redneck territory. So those, in fact, when I got to BYU, they're like, you have a swearing problem. I'm like, let's clarify what's a swearing problem, because those words, hell, shit, down, ass, they're in the scriptures, my dad always said, although then I found out he never read the scriptures, so shit's not in there. I remember partway through going, Dad, I read the scriptures. I found everything, but I didn't find shit. They're not in there. Anyway. So
your dad sounds like a fun guy.
Even as a true believing Mormon, like I try to mute myself around my community, but my kids know I swear, because that's like, I tease them. I said, it's like some people grow up learning English and Spanish. I grew up, my mom had a master's in speech, and my dad's redneck. So I speak swearing and I speak fluently. I have two languages. I go back and forth, especially if I get upset. But anyway, so she's she got married in the temple last year. One of the reasons I stayed in as long as I did, because I knew that was coming and I didn't want to be left out of that. And I didn't want to abandon her on that. I felt like I had been raised in the mafia, born into the mafia, raised in the mafia, raised my kids in the mafia. And then one day I realized, holy shit, this is the mafia. What are we doing here? But I didn't want to leave without my daughter. I didn't want to leave without my kids. And I didn't want to abandon her. Like, her whole life goal was coming to its completion, if you will. And so she's still, I remember how that felt. Yeah, she's still in, still loves it. We share what we can share, and we avoid what we need to avoid. And there's been testing, like I stepped over the line, or vice versa, because there was a point where she didn't want me to say anything, and I was like, okay, then you can't say anything. It can't just be you say what you want, and I never, So, and then my second oldest resigned a year after out of high school. She had a terrible experience. And she never believed, and we didn't, as true believing parents, we didn't really know this. She was going through the cognitive dissonance of being like, this doesn't make any sense, but my family wants me to believe this, for a long time. And she had some pretty traumatic bishop interview experiences as well. It was one of the reasons we pulled our kids out, just because, for the temple recommend interview, the bishop would say, look at this picture of Joseph Smith on the wall. What do you think about him? And she didn't really believe in any of it. And as a family, we read the Book of Mormon every year, and then we'd send our kids to their rooms and say, this, the Mormonized promise, pray about it. You're going to have this great experience. And we didn't find out until much later, but she would go in her room, not have an experience, but feel bad because everyone else was. So she'd make stuff up. What's terrible about now, because she didn't want to disappoint us. And then she was doing the same thing in bishop interviews, because she's saying, yeah, I believe this, but she didn't believe any of it. And so it got to a point where it was causing her great anxiety. She didn't like to go to church. She didn't like the activities. She didn't like being, even seminary. She finished all the seminary. You had to pass an interview saying you agreed. And I was like, what kind of institution sends their youth to 4 years of learning about their school and then said to graduate, you have to agree with what we say? So that was a whole ordeal. And she was thinking about going to BU Idaho. So, but then she was like, no, I don't want them to have control over me anymore. She went to Slick. And then a year later, because everywhere she went, they found her. She resigned. She was like, and she really did feel like the church was an abusive system that had abused her whole life, that she had been raised in a cult. That's what the word she used in her resignation letter. And so she's been out for a long time. She's 22 now. And my third oldest go ahead.
Is that the same daughter who you said had a gay friend?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. So
and she felt like
she knew from the beginning, like all of our stuff about LGBT.
Yeah, she's the one. When it came out too, that was kind of like, I was already nuanced, having trouble going to my own classes, and she's coming home and she was like, well, if I say I don't believe in this policy, the teacher will literally stop the class, look at me, and like stare me down, like until I agree. And then she goes, I won't agree. So he was intimidating her. And the other kids in the class were not so bad, but she just felt like, she goes, like, I don't have a voice here. Like, and she's saying out loud what I'm feeling. I'm like, yeah, I know. Why am I making her go? And I don't even want to be there.
Were you guys able to talk about it at the same time? Or were you having to keep that from your daughter, that you felt that same way?
That's a good question. In the beginning, when I started realizing that it could not be true, and there's not this one true path, then I was like, yeah, okay, if you don't really want to go to yoga, you don't have to. Yeah, okay, if you don't want to church, you don't have to. We'd always make her go to sacrament. It was like, this is what we do as a family. But then that year I had a new baby. When I have a new baby, I don't go for 6 months anyway. I'm like, this is the only time my husband takes all the kids and goes somewhere for 3 hours. Are you kidding me? I'm not missing on that. I'm staying home.
That's what I do with my babies too.
So she would come home with me, or if I wanted to go to my class or go visit, she'd stay home with the baby who was asleep or whatever. So yeah, we let her out of stuff more and more. And cause I could just see anxiety wise, it was affecting her badly. And definitely, not being able to have a voice was a terrible position for her to be in. I could see that. So yes, that was.
It sounds like being coerced also, not just not having a voice, but like being coerced into.
Well, and that friend was in the
lifestyle and this belief system.
Yeah. And that gay friend was also in the class, but no one knew she was gay. So yeah, it was a hard situation. Painful. So like, I don't think believing Mormons that, follow the prophet with just even, I don't even have a problem with, it wasn't the policy that I had a problem with, because when I found out that it's something that you're born, usually, I mean, there can be environmental circumstances. I mean, there's lots of aspects to go with it. But when I realized it wasn't a sin, we'll say that. When I got to that point, I was like, nothing about how they treat the gays is right. It's the same thing they did with the women with polygamy, saying, you're not going to go to heaven unless I get 30 wives. And it was the same thing they did with blacks in the priesthood. You guys, I don't know why, but God said you were bad in the pre-existence, and now they're doing like, this is happening the same, and saying that at that time, I know they've changed it since then, but if you were gay and you got married, it was automatic excommunication.
Right.
Now it's still excommunication, apostasy, but it's secondary. The bishop gets to choose if he wants to go after you or not, which is still insane. And so, when you get to that understanding of this isn't a sin, and then people now are like, well, the policy's been reversed. I'm like, yeah, but they still don't, they wouldn't allow them to get married in the temple. And if the whole purpose of this life really is to get married in the temple and have your family be eternal, and gays are left out, like that no God would do that. That doesn't make any sense. Plus I know the backstory of how the temple came about and how all that was all man-made. So I'm like, this is, not only is this man-made, but the leaders today, they have blood on their hands.
Absolutely.
In suicides, there's been adult suicides. I mean, the shock therapy, once you really research what they've said and what they've done, and the fact that, Oaks is the worst. He could be the next prophet. He did at BYU, and he still believes it. You can tell. I mean, they're not as open because politically they get crucified right now, but it's just, it's something. And so that was a big turning point for me and her to be like, oh, okay, you don't believe, well, there's parts, and I wasn't at the point, I was just starting my journey. It was when my oldest left on her mission. So I definitely wasn't at the point I am now. But by the time she graduated and went to a year of college, by the time that was a few years later, her resignation, I was like, this is the best mental health move for you. I don't want to do it, but I could just see it was a great mental health move for her. And then you've already heard my third son, my fourth, same thing. A lot of his friends are gay. And then he started having the same experiences in Sunday school as her, only from his classmates, especially on the gay stuff. And he's a controversial kid. I love him, but he's not asking questions in Sunday school because he wants you to agree with him. He's asking questions like, this doesn't make sense to me. Okay. That's your answer, but it still doesn't. There's no follow the prophet. He doesn't even listen to me. For him. And so
you raised such a free thinker. Good for you.
That's the good thing about critical thinking, huh? And in fact, I just he's already written his resignation letter. We haven't turned it in yet. By the time this airs, he wants to. We told him he had to wait till he's 18. He's 17 now, but he's been bullied in this neighborhood severely by that Sunday school class. They've always put him down. He's a year younger in school than them because he has the fall birthday. It's never been a good fit, and it just got to the point where he was being put down. He was being bullied, and so I quit making him go just because of the way he's being treated. They weren't treating him Christ-like, and he wasn't allowed to have a voice for sure, and he felt that deeply. And he, all of his best friends are gay. I don't know why they just are. And he was like, "This isn't right," and I don't want to be part of something where this is what we stand for. I just don't. So he slowly went inactive last year and now wants to resign. And then my 13-year-old,
all over my face.
Oh,
sorry. Go away, Katie.
My 13-year-old's a lot like my oldest. very TBM. She's really loving it. So I was really worried about her when I resigned, but that's been the greatest thing because we were already before I resigned, about 9 months before I resigned, I spent 9 months slowly sending out a 9-page email. I call it my coming out letter of like, look, this has been my 8-year journey because I knew it was going to be a big shock to some people. Some people it wouldn't be, but most people, I knew it was going to be a huge shock. And I didn't want that lesson and really study, be them thinking, oh, she got casual in her yoga pants. Because I do yoga. And that was one of the comments. My friend quit wearing her garments after yoga and then she got casual and da-da-da. So I said, that's what they're going to think about me. So I was like, I want them to know. This was a conscious and very careful decision. So I spent 9 months sending that out to people that I thought would want to know. And I didn't do it with the intention of resigning either. I was just like, I need people to know. And if I get X'd, I get X'd. Like, Anyway, so this particular child, I was really worried about her. And in that 9 months, I started saying, okay, Sundays is going to be a family day. Decided this with my spouse. And we're going to take turns on who chooses. So when it was her turn, we went to church. And most everybody else didn't choose church. And so we started about once a month going for a while. And we would do our own family home church lessons. We called them, and some of her friends would make fun of her, you can't have home church. Anyway, so then I resigned. 2 days later, it's COVID, and now everyone's doing home church.
Yeah, home church.
We started a trend, which is so funny because in my coming out letter, at the end of it, I say how I hope this is something like I'm starting a trend. Because when I first started doing yoga in Utah County, people would be like, oh, you can't say namaste, that's praying. Or I would do green smoothies a long time ago, and now it's normal. Like,
Oh, yeah. We all drink green smoothies.
And then home church is normal. Anyway, I was laughing because I was like, this is like my answer. Anyway, for a long time, I would go and you can go online and see what they're teaching. So I would just look at the lesson material for young women's and I would just teach it to the whole family, but I'd put in the truth. Everything they left out, I just put in. So I would teach the same things. Now we don't do that as much. Our sacrament meetings are really fun. I will let the girls pass the sacrament. I bless the sacrament. They bless the sacrament. I'm like, they'll be like, we can't do that. I'm like, I'm not Mormon. I can do whatever the hell I want. Sacrament in our house, we can do it however we want. So we do it however we want.
That is amazing.
The boys are in
charge. That would feel so good to like reclaim that thing that like I always watched being happen, but could never ever even think about being a part of or participating in. That's so cool that you
just
let your girls do that.
Our own, and when we feel with COVID, we haven't wanted to go back anyway. So we just do our lessons here, and sometimes I do it. Sometimes we let the kids do it. We rotate around, but I've kind of switched to more value-based teaching. Before I was teaching from what was because I wanted her to feel like she was getting the young women lesson, and she wanted. None of our kids have really ever, except for one family in the neighborhood, really fit in. I want to say with the other kids. And so she had some falling out with some of the Mormon friends. And I was just counting it as a blessing because I was like, good, they'll quit inviting her to stuff. I do have to stay with me and I love her and I'd rather have her anyway. So she has other friends that are in the other neighborhoods, and they're Mormon, but they aren't in the same ward, if that makes sense. So what we do at the church and what they do, it's not a big deal right now. I do really want, next year when it's seminary, I want to like find a group of people and I want to have a seminary for her because I know she really will want to do seminary, but I want to just see if there's something that we can do with other parents. Like I'm thinking just a small group of 5 or 6. That's what I did when we homeschooled. We'd have co-ops. So I'd love to like use the letter to my wife as the template for the seminary lessons. That's what I want to do. That'll be next fall. So I'm hoping to and I want to put a girls' camp together for her this summer because I know a lot of post-Mormons around here. And then if she wants to go to the actual girls' camp, my rule right now is I have to go. So if they want to accept, and before I resigned, I talked with my bishop and he said non-members can go as long as they're not in a teaching capacity. So I can go and help with the cooking. And we have a new bishop now. I don't know if he'll let me go. I don't think he really likes me, but that's my role. And I've explained it to the neighbors. I said, look, would you take your child and send them to a girls' camp that you knew was all post-Mormons and that they were going to be preaching post-Mormonism the entire time? Would you feel comfortable with that? Yeah, that's why I don't feel comfortable with it. So if she does go to something, I have to be there right now.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then in answer to your choice question, I've gotten that a lot with her, especially because we got some new young women leaders, and one of them she was my ministering, I call her my ministering angel. She's the best ever. and we're really good friends. And she and her other leader separately, they asked me, "Don't you want to give her the choice?" And so after
the choice to come to church or not.
Exactly. The choice to come, or the choice to come to Young Women's, because they felt like I was just abruptly pulling her out of everything, which I was I was trying not to do it abruptly. But anyway, so when I resigned, I was like, I've got to think about it. And I probably read 25 psychology books. I researched the BITE model, the bounded choice with Lilek. And I applied it all to Mormonism. And I was like, this is all unethical persuasion, the way they do Young Women's, the way they do Sunday school, the way they do seminary, even girls camp. They're using feelings and testimony when that's your feelings. You're feeling one of those wonderful things and those emotions because of your connection to human beings. It doesn't have anything to do with Joseph Smith being true, but they'll connect it to that.
Right.
That's unethical persuasion. And so I wrote them, this is how we met. I wrote them a 7-page response after my 25 books of what giving your children a choice means to me.
People aren't going to ask you questions anymore because they're going to be like, I'm going to have to read a textbook when she responds.
the New Relief Society, or the new Young Women president, her husband was the former bishop, and everything. I was like, when I resigned, oh, that's another long story, but yes, he knows I'm long-winded. Nothing's ever less than 7 pages single-spaced. Anything. So I said, I think the new bishop already heard about me. He's like, I CC'd him on it. He didn't respond. So I'm sure he read it, but he's like, I don't even want her to think she could send something like that to me. But
I mean, having read your stuff, I got to say, like, none of it is superfluous. None of it is just rambling or ranting. It's as succinct as it can be. There's a lot to pack in there.
Right.
So,
and that's what I always go back and like, what can I get out? I can't get anything out. This is all true. Yeah. But I'll just sum it up. And basically what I said to them was, once I've applied the BITE model of bounded choice and what's ethical persuasion to Mormonism, none of it passes. Mm-hmm. So if I were to say, I'm giving my child a choice by going to church, and then I send them to a brainwashing camp, which is what those things are, that's not really giving her a choice. And then I relate it back to myself. If you really want to talk about choice, I was born Mormon. I was raised Mormon. I was baptized at 8. I was taught that it was the one and only true church, that the prophet speaks for God, that the prophet will never lead me astray. That's the only thing I was ever taught my entire life. And to me, that's not choice.
Right.
And I went to church, and I went to seminary, and I did the girls' camps, and I did all that, but I was never given a choice. And that's what I tell them in there. I said, and now that I'm realizing, not only was I not given a choice, but I was lied to on a lot of things. The last thing I want to do is do that with my kids. So I just had a really hard time. I've got a TBM, I've got nuanced, I want to be Mormon, but I want to talk her out of it. I've got 4 that are like, yay, we don't have to go to church anymore. This is awesome. Everyone's all over the map. And so I took the principles from the BITE model and bounded choice and made them into it. This is what we do a lot in homeschools. We make books. And I had the kids illustrate it because I wanted them to get it in their heads. And there's just the 10 top principles, which are all in Mormonism, but they weren't. I mean, those books aren't written by Mormons. They're sociologists and psychologists and therapists. And the first one is, you might be in an unhealthy group if the group says that and literally this is quoted out of Lilek's Bounded Choice book. If the group quote says they have a path to salvation where they know what happened before you came to earth, what you're supposed to do when you're here, and what will happen when you die. And I was like, that's like exactly what Mormonism teaches. And that's her number one. It's called transcendental, she has a big word for it, but that's what it means. I'm like, anyway, that's not healthy. And every cult teaches that, a one truth, one way. And so on the other side of the book, it says a healthy group would teach you that their group is one way to truth and happiness. But if it doesn't work for you, you could go to a different group or something like that. I have it here. Right here. But anyway, and then the second concept, and so I came up with 10 concepts. So I was hoping that would bring the TBM, the nuance, like bring them all together. The second one, you might be in an unhealthy group if the group tells you only listen to the happy stories. And then the other is it's a good group if they say, because I've been considered anti ever since I shared my story, even by family and friends, just by saying what I went through. That's it. Not even saying what I learned. I'm like, whoa. I learned in the psychology books, that's not anti. And if you call it anti, that's actually called gaslighting. But it's okay for me to share my story. In fact, what they said is the three things someone can do to heal is, number one, find out what's healthy and unhealthy in groups, what's cultish and what's not. Number two, share their story with family and friends. And then number three, help other people. Well, that's what people are doing that leave the church. And then people in the church are calling it anti. But I'm like, this is what like therapists are. Anyway, so it just
people in the church are calling it, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone.
Exactly. And I said that in my 7-page letter. I said, that's a gaslighting technique. And I went through all the gaslighting techniques. And I said, all the Mormon prophet, President Nelson, Uchtdorf, they use gaslighting techniques in conferences. You really think I'm going to feel, and I said, not only am I, because one of the other questions she asked me wasn't just, you want to give your kid a choice? She said, but don't you think it's like this path might be not good for people like you, but for me, like I love it. And some people it's the right path. She asked me that too. So I was answering that question. And so what I said was, the problem is that's like saying, racism's bad, but I'm white and it doesn't affect me. So sorry, it doesn't work for you guys. It works great for me.
Nice point.
So what I said in my letter to her was, look, yes, there's going to be people, extroverts, that Mormonism is going to be great for, but it doesn't change the fact that the institution is abusive. It's abusive via the LGBTQ. It's abusive via the bishop interviews. And I went through, it's abusive via the unethical persuasion. I went through and I said, I said, what you stand for, I stand against. And I'm sorry, but I said, I still want to be friends with you and I still love you, but I oppose what you stand for. And I'm going to be open about that from now on. And you're going to think it's anti. You've learned that it's anti. But what I've learned is that's actually, in post-Mormon terms and psychology terms, it's normal for me to share my story, number one. Number two, when you call me anti for sharing my story, you're gaslighting me. And that's not normal. So you're the one that I said, people are going to say she can leave the church, but she couldn't leave it alone. I said, people are literally going to say that about me, but I hope you know and understand that that's called gaslighting and that I'm not doing that. And in the end, I talk about, they know me, they've known me for 20 years. I said, you know me, I'm a passionate person. I'm authentic. I practice what I preach. I live my heart's on my sleeve. That's not going to go away because I'm a post-Mormon. I'm going to take what I believe and I'm still going to be open and interject like I had 8 kids because I was building up the kingdom of God. I would love one day, because some of my kids probably will say, I'll probably have grandkids in the church. I would love one day for it to pass my little book. I would love for it to pass all the 10 healthy tests. Right now it fails all of them. I don't think it's going to happen. But in the instance through Facebook, if I find someone, I found so many people in the same position as me, it shouldn't have taken 8 years for me to leave. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have anywhere to go. I thought I was the only one. And then leaving and finding out not only I'm the only one, but people have way worse stories with their kids in bishop interviews than I do. These people have way worse, it's way worse than I thought it was, especially at the top. What the top know and what they're doing. Like, I don't know how they go to bed at night. I don't know how they sleep. But just getting to that point, post-Mormonism has definitely made me feel like, man, I really need to speak up and speak loud. And if I already have lost whatever stature I had here. If I lose it, I lose it. I don't really care. I would rather be true to myself. And if someone doesn't want to be my friend because of that, it's okay, because then they're not really my friend. But I had already sent in my resignation letter. I've been trying to contact my bishop because I really did want to give him the benefit of the doubt of answering my questions, knowing I was going to leave. Yeah. But 3 people passed away in 3 weeks. And I kept being like, I don't want to bug him now. And leading up to that, for that entire 9 months, I left this out. The entire 9 months of me giving my letter, every day, in Mormon terms, you would call it the Spirit. I would wake up and have this overwhelming prompting from the Spirit to resign. And then I go to yoga. And then by the end of the night, I would talk myself out of it, every day for 9 months. But it got to when you feel like you have to go up and bear your testimony, that overwhelming, it got to the point where I'm going to die if I don't resign, because I know this is what I'm supposed to do.
Wow.
Anyway, so I finally was I'm not waiting. He's in charge of the funerals. I'm just going to send it to him, and the stake president of the church office was a 14-page resignation letter. But then when he got back with me about it, I was like, it would be really helpful for me to have closure, because you don't even know my story. You don't know, I kept everything hidden from you because I didn't feel comfortable sharing with you. I said I would like to unabashedly share it with you. But I said, but I don't want to do it alone, because we don't do one-on-one interviews. So I said, if you could bring a counselor, and then it was COVID, so we just did it over. But I emailed them ahead of time. I said, I practiced it once. It was 55 minutes. So bring some popcorn and a glass of water and make sure you've gone to the bathroom.
You know, you say you're well prepared, and like you so are.
They listened, and my speech is my thing anyway. And I gave that speech, and Bobby put it into a flip book, but it doesn't do it justice because the emotion behind it. And I had to take out a lot of the specifics, like because they both knew my kids, but
we got the names.
At the end of it, I don't know what they probably were in shock. I felt the spirit so strong. I was like, if they don't like feel what I'm feeling, like I couldn't say anymore. And, anyway, it was really, I will be forever grateful to both of them because I really felt like I needed someone to listen to my story that was representing the institution. And I knew that when I sent that letter to the offices, they're not going to listen. They're not reading it. And they knew my kids, and they knew everything, every experience they had both, well, the bishop more had been involved with it. I think the poor counselor was in shock because I said the F word maybe a couple times. But
people don't like to hear that if they haven't heard that before. Even after I stopped believing, and my husband was using that word a lot, I was like, "Oh, ouch! My ears."
I know.
Now it's fine.
I'm a hypocrite, so it's only ouch if my kids say it. To say it, like you can see
that's a mommy word.
But I said, when you're 45 and you have 8 kids, then you can say the F word. Until then, there's nothing in your life that requires that word. I said, plus, you guys still have to like go get jobs and be professional. Like, I don't have to do that. My husband makes a good living. I don't have to. I can say what I want, and like, it's okay. Which I know is a total hypocrite, and they call me out on it all the time. But
good for them because you raised free thinkers.
So it was the speech was like, I just felt like a huge, weight lifted from my shoulders. I felt really grateful that they listened to it. We obviously we had to agree to disagree at the end.
Right.
And he had some questions for me, and then I ended up saying, well, I'll think about it. And then I formally sent him an email saying, yeah, I thought about it. It was actually 3 pages, single spaced. I was like, this is my last epistle. I'm sorry. Epistle, I called it. I can't just sit down and write a normal email without it becoming like an essay. Mm-hmm. But, and then it was official. And then I had a huge breakdown for 2 weeks after, which I wasn't expecting. And that's how I joined Facebook and the post-Mormon groups. Because I was like, is this normal? Because I thought this would be the best thing ever. I thought I'd be flying like a kite, and I literally can't get out of bed. And so it's been a long process from there to where I am now. And then writing that book, the children's book, has really helped me be like, okay, refocus. I lost everything. I'm starting over again. I can start with this. And we have our values in our house. We call, it used to be Jesus Christ's gospel makes us safe for K. It's an acronym, but then I quit believing in Jesus Christ. So I had to change it again. They're like, Mom, how many times are you going to change what you believe? I'm sorry. I didn't know that as a Mormon. There was a book that I love it, and I'm going to make a children's book out of it. They're like, you can change your beliefs every 15 minutes if you want. So I'm like, you can? I didn't know that. This is such a beautiful truth. How come nobody told me this? I could be atheist today, and tomorrow I could find out there's a God and not be atheist. This is beautiful.
Yeah,
I mean, it's okay. So Safer K for us, now I changed it to positivity and mindfulness makes us Safer K, and it's just service, appreciation, forgiveness, eternal love. Because I really love the Mormon eternity thing. But I say we talk about, we know our love in this life is going to go beyond somewhere. Like you'll always know, even when I'm gone. So eternal love, respect, and then kindness. That's what our family values are. And my 17-year-old said to me the other last week, it was so funny, because I still like to teach. I'm an educator at heart, and I was like, okay, it's time for our Sunday lesson. He's like, you are no fun post-Mormon. I thought if you resigned, like church would be over. Why do you keep giving us lessons?
What was the age of that kid? I'm sorry, I missed
17.
17.
He was like, I thought that
he thought he was going to have Sunday fun day.
Yeah. He's like, you're almost worse, Mom. So, I'm like, I'm sorry.
So I do want to ask now, like, about your kind of curriculum. Like, you studied so much with your kids before, all this homeschooling, so many hours, like you were talking about, thousands and thousands of hours of your personal study plus family study, just like on such a regular basis. What are you doing now as far as that goes? You say like now you've got some new principles that you've got your own new sets of values. Can you talk about how you discovered those new kinds of things, how you're implementing them in your life now, and do you still have like family study time on a regular basis like you used to?
Sure. So our Book of Mormon family study time stopped even before my first daughter went on her mission. It's more one-on-one. If she ever listens to this, she's like, we quit doing that a long time ago. But so I would say since I've resigned to now, I've read probably over 25 books. And I probably bought my kids like 50 books. And I really love books. But it's called Raising Free Thinkers, A Practical Guide for Parenting Beyond Belief. Have you read that?
I just did. I've done like 2 videos on that so far. Yeah, I love
all the resources in there. So it's like, okay, I got to relearn how to teach my kids about sex, beyond the big talk. I got to relearn how to teach my kids about drugs. Just say KNOW. This is my favorite one. How to stop losing your shit with your kids. I brought this to book club last month. They didn't like that it said shit, but I was like, that was my book. But one of the biggest things, because some of my younger kids, or my 13-year-old especially, is still like, well, what do I still want to believe in Mormonism? And I'm out, but I don't want to just pull her out. Even though I'm not saying her to classes, I can't just shut down her beliefs. So one of the biggest things it said, if you're raising free thinkers, if you're around a religious community and it talks about Christians, most people are Christians in the United States, you should still be teaching them about the Bible. You should so it suggests, and I have all these books on the creation myths around the world. So Bible's a creation myth, right? And so that's what we started with this summer. Every Sunday I read a different creation myth. And then at the end you read the Bible one. And then you're like, oh, that's a myth too. And so that's kind of started to drop on. Oh, and then the Book of Mormon's a myth too. Oh, and then and so that's kind of where the religious stuff has gone to now. Mm-hmm. And then I brought my books because you said you're going to ask that, but you can see the problems we have. So can Quillen learn to control his temper? Train your angry dragon.
Oh, I love the train your dragon ones.
Punk the skunk learns to say sorry.
Cute.
Captain Snout, this is about automatic negative thoughts.
Oh, wow. So we're just going to have like a list in the description box of this video of like all the great, because I want to know all these books, because I can't wait to buy them for my family.
And my book, I've called my book, it's, I got an editor. So she's taken all my kids' cute drawings and put them in color and then dolled them up. It's called Protecting Kids Against Unethical Persuasion. And it's really turned it into our 10 commandments, because there's 10 concepts in there. And so it's funny because it's not just church. It's like politics right now. It's with social media. It's with everything. And so they know what they are. And we'll go over them. They're getting sick of them, but I'll do it's like the 10 commandments. So one Sunday we're doing 1, and we're 2. And so they kind of know them by number. And so my daughter went to a young women thing, and they came home with this, it's the Stake Young Women theme. And it was look up, look within, look without. But number 2 and 3 was like, don't read anything on the internet that's not from church approved sources. I was like, that's number 4. And then it was like, and then 3 was like, the devil will make sure, it was something about the devil. And that's one of it's like number 7. So I was like, which numbers are those, And so I'm like feeling a little bit more confident sending some kids if they want to go to places, because they come home and right after I finished the book and we went through it, Terry Crews, I don't know if you know who he is, the actor. He's on Everybody Hates Chris. He's the dad. Anyway, he had said something about Black Lives Matter. It wasn't against them. It was just like something like, I can't remember what he said, but he got in a lot of trouble for it. He's an actor. And he was like, look, I'm all for the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm still for it. I'm just saying we should also think about the kids that are black on black and the kids that are getting killed. And he said, but what the big red flag is to me is if any group has a leader that you can't disagree with or criticize, that's not healthy. I'm all, number 3. So I'm like texting the clip to him. I'm like, look, I told you it was in politics. Because number 3, it literally says you might be in an unhealthy group if the group tells you cannot disagree with or openly criticize the leader of the group. Anyway, so we use it all the time. It's going to be on Amazon at the end of November, hopefully, but yeah.
So hopefully by the time this video airs, your book will be out on Amazon. I can put a link in the description below. People can go check it out for themselves, order that, have that in their families, and be able to educate their kids and arm them with knowledge to protect themselves, to be able to recognize and hopefully us adults as well, honestly. Like, we all need this, right?
I know. I told my editor, I was like, I wanted to say it's for teens and adults too. And she goes, yeah, but it's kids' drawings. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't know any of these until I was 45 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't know. They're all 10 of them. I didn't know any of them until I was 45 years old. And that's unacceptable.
But I think hopefully you'll be able to like influence parents by like getting these kids books, and these parents like, honestly, like I learned all my best parenting things from like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
Yeah, we have that one.
And watching Bluey on Disney Plus. Have you ever seen that show?
You don't have Disney Plus.
Oh, cute. Oh my gosh. Disney Plus, it's like, it's worth it just to watch Bluey. I'm like a better parent because I watch these little kid shows, and like, I learn like how they resolve conflict and how they talk with their kids and anyway. So I'm all about like learning from kids books as well for myself to see how I should be too, or what I can learn from it too. So I'm excited. I've seen your rough draft of your book. It looks amazing. And I'm so glad that this is going to be out in the world. You are doing such a great contribution to the world. And that was really interesting what you said earlier about the three steps of healing. I think you said share your story. One was recognize, find out what's healthy, share your story, and then do something to help others.
Help others get out of the same situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's what my book is, really,
that
for
is
my kids and for whoever reads it.
and another question I was going to ask is, for you personally, how you are managing to cope with your mental and emotional health through all of this mess and the garbage of a situation, and how it's affecting your family dynamics and even you yourself. I think, you had mentioned that you started noticing like physical symptoms of trauma as well. So if you want to talk a little bit more about how you go through processing things and healing yourself and like what you do for your own health.
Sure. So it's interesting because I'm pretty introverted. At least I have been for the last, since I was married with all the kids and stuff. And so Mormon church is not good for introverts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I pulled out of visiting teaching before it got changed. And I literally, I changed it to ministering. My bishop, even at the time, he's like, a year before they changed it to ministering, because I was like, that's all I can do. And he's like, we're already doing that for Gretchen, because I was like, I don't want anybody unless they want to offer to watch my kids. I don't want to talk to them. I said, I have like so much on my plate, like, and I wasn't really, I didn't tell him I wasn't believing, but I also wasn't believing. So I'm like, and I don't want to teach anybody else. But I blame a lot of stuff on anxiety. But it got to the point where my anxiety at church was so, I could go in and talk to people and say hi, but if I heard, whatever was going on in sacrament, or whatever was going on in Sunday school, or even when I was in the nursery, if it wasn't my turn to teach and the other person was teaching something about the prophet, and I'm just like, ooh, it was just trigger. Mm-hmm. So headaches, anxiety, just, and waves of depression of like, do I really want to give this up? Nobody's going to like me. Everybody's going to look down on me. My TPM kids are going to hate me. Like, just waves that it goes through depression, anxiety. And I'd say that first 2 weeks after I resigned, it was the darkest place I've ever been, because I am not a crier, but I would just wake up in the night and I was just convulsive sobbing, because it really was like it was like a child died when I resigned. It was like I had to suffer the death of something. Or maybe even a better example is, and I've never been divorced before, so maybe this is a bad example, but if you really love your husband and you have this great relationship, but then you find out he's cheating, he's lying, he's not what you thought, but you still really love him and you have to leave. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's like you're bitter, but you're also sad. Anyway, so it took me a couple weeks and then the post-Mormon Facebook group really saved my butt because I found out, this is normal. I can rebuild. I'm trying to think. I definitely went through a paranoia phase because it was COVID too. So people in the neighborhood would pass and not wave. And I'm like, did they know I resigned? Did they not wave for me? Because I'm not usually, I'm the type of person, I literally don't know what's going on with anybody else. I don't have social media. It's not that I don't care, but it's like, I'm not.
You have a lot on your plate.
I'm never going to be, I had one person that I worked with once in homeschool, and she's like, I know you're never going to talk about me behind my back. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. She's like, could you tell me everything to my face? I'm like, oh, that wasn't so nice. But that's kind of how I am. Like if it's in front of me and I'm noticing it. So, but then I started getting paranoid, like, or I'd text somebody and they didn't text me right back. And I'm like, oh, they're offended that I sent them my letter. And some people responded and then some people didn't. So I don't know what they think. Did they not get, because in all of my emails, I said, please just, even if you don't want to read it, let me know you got this. So I'm not wondering. And some people didn't even respond. So I'm like, okay. Anyway, so I went through that kind of panic. And then a few weeks after that, I just got to the point where I'm like, hey, I never cared before. Why am I caring now? Let's go back to original Gretchen, who doesn't really give a shit. She's like, that needs to be me again. And when everything got closed down that same month too, it was kind of just like my whole world fell. And then there was the earthquake, and someone on the post-Mormon group right before the earthquake said, you're going to feel like the whole world's shaking and there's an earthquake around you. And then I woke up and there was an earthquake, and I'm like, man, he wasn't kidding. But I think reading has saved me. It's the second. All the psychology books, they validated why I left. Like there wasn't a single book that didn't prove that Mormonism wasn't a cult or had an unhealthy. There wasn't a single one. Yeah. And so validating, and all the writing. I think when people ask me something, yeah, I'm long-winded, but I also think that I'm processing. This is what I've felt. This is what I think. Yeah. And then getting to a point. Okay, well, what do I still believe? The only thing I still have is my Safer K and positivity and mindfulness. Like, because I've always done yoga, I taught yoga. Those are still, I believed in Mormonism, I believe in post-Mormonism. So this is going to be our base. You know, positivity, we call it being positive and present makes a Safer K. I have it on a plaque. So I'm just going to rebuild. And one of the other things that I read in one of the Stephen Hassan's books on getting out of cults was, which was so helpful to me, was he said, if you were born in one and raised in one, it might have been in a different book. I think it was his, but you have this belief system and then you leave it. Don't expect to have a new belief system overnight. And so I had like some of my family members being, quit saying what you don't believe. Tell me what you do believe. You know, do what you believe. And I'm like, I don't know what I believe anymore. Like everything, and they don't understand your world's crashing down. They just think you're anti and you're possessed by the devil or whatever. Yeah, but
you do this to yourself and.
Yeah, giving myself that time to go, you know what? I don't know what I believe. I don't know what I believe. And then through those books, I already said this earlier, I found out that there's a concept of you don't have to stick to your beliefs. You can change it. And I was like, whoa, that blew my mind. It still blows my mind. I'm like, so I'm agnostic atheist. I've got like 1% chance there's a God. I really think I researched religion clear back to the beginning of time. It's more man-made God every time. Like, you know, it's probably not likely, but because I could change, I'm going to give that 1%. Like it's a possibility. So then what are the values? And then just refocusing around, okay, those values. And I spent a lot of the summer teaching my kids the true history, I would say. So I went what they would have been learning in church. And I'm still on all the email groups, even though I'm post. I told them, please, you still send me what you're going to be teaching or whatever, or Relief Society. I haven't gotten up the guts. I plan to they have a December activity. But because all the activities they've done after COVID it's how we hear him, and I don't even believe in him. Yeah. And one was at the temple, and one was at my neighbor's house. So I was like, so I'm gearing up. But my big goal in my uber Mormon neighborhood is just to prove that post-Mormons are not bad people. We're not deceived of the devil. It's okay if we don't believe in God. It's okay to be different. And I'm still the same person. And so the next activity they have, I'm going to text somebody and just say, when the lesson's over, text me, I'm coming. And I'm just going to, because I really do, because with COVID, I don't see them anymore. Now I'm not going to church, I don't see them anymore. And I really do miss my friends and my neighbors. And it'll be interesting. I think some people think that it's awkward that I'm there, but I went to the trunk or treat the other night, and it was weird to be, it's the closest I've got. We live right next to the church, but we were in the church parking lot, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to be here. But it's so fun to see everybody. So I'm still working through that, but I really do want to get to the point where I go to the Relief Society activities when the lesson's over, because there's always socializing, have the snacks. And I found quite a few people that I didn't even know that were post on the Facebook group who live down the street from me, live across the street. And so I found out the post-Mormon thing is wine and coffee. So we started our own little wine group. My friend is teaching. She's like, I've needed some major teaching. And I'm like, you know what though? I don't have to drink alcohol. It doesn't really matter to me, but it's funny that there's 6 people around here that like, that's, if someone will just come and they have it, they're like, we don't care if you don't drink it. This is just what we would do. And we would just want to be ourselves. And I'm like, that's fine with me. Like, let's do it. Like, who cares? Like, and they don't feel like they can do that to a believing Mormon. They can't say, hey, we're having margaritas and a party. They can't do that. And that's unfortunate because, I don't want my kids, I tell them your brain's not done developing till 25. So the alcohol should be till 25. They don't all listen to me, but that's what I say.
Yeah.
But I'm 46. So if I want to try a little bit, but I also, I have 8 kids and it took me so long to lose all that weight, and alcohol is all sugar. So only at parties and only to make someone feel happy a little bit, But it's just funny because I found it's the code word. If I show up to, there's like 4 people in the neighborhood. I've never met them. I've lived here for 20 years. Some of them have been here for 16 to 20 years. We don't even know each other because the Mormons don't know unless you're in a leadership position.
Mm-hmm.
I just text them and I'm like, hey, do you want to come to a wine and cheese party? Immediate response. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're having a wine and cheese party. And I don't even know how to buy wine or how to drink wine. I don't know anything about it. But I know that if I say that, all of a sudden it's like I'm their friend. Like,
Yeah.
And so we started that little group, and it's been so fun to make new friendships and hear other people's stories. And there's some never mo's and post-mo's or inactives or whatever. But just it's a total different dynamic. I think you have to have your tribe. I definitely have lost mine. Mm-hmm. For the time being, I'm planning on trying to like go back, and if my kids want to go to church or whatever, like attend. That was always my role. I have to be there. So, I just hope COVID lasts forever, so I never have to go.
There are a lot of active believing Mormons who feel like, I really, really like home church. I really, really like it. Maybe we just won't go back to visiting in a physical building. Like, it's kind of nice doing like Zoom calls with sacrament meeting or whatever, Yeah.
It's
been really nice.
Interesting to see, but I'll ride that wave as long as I can.
Yeah. That it really is a nice kind of like easy and quick, simple code word, like coffee or wine or whatever, that's.
Yeah. Or do you want to go to Starbucks? And then they're like, okay, she's one of mine. Like,
yeah. Like she gets it. She gets it.
Or she doesn't care. Like, whatever I don't know. It's kind of dumb, but it is definitely wine and coffee are the 2 code words.
Yeah. No, I definitely think if I had been invited to something like that when I was active believing, I would have felt like I need to take a stand, I need to make it known that coffee is sinful or something, like, oh, so stupid. Like, I never would have gone to something like that just because I couldn't be seen showing up in a place like that and, had to avoid the appearance of evil.
Yeah.
Oh man. Missed opportunities. Well, I do want to wrap this up. Thank you so much for sharing all of these great experiences. And I want to sign up for your homeschool classes, please. Because, so I was a student of psychology at BYU. Okay. But I don't know. I feel like maybe psychology looked a little different at a church school than it might have if I had attended at a different school. I felt like, oh, I know the answers because I'm a member of the one true church. So all these psychologists and scientists have these theories, but I know. Anyway. Right. So I would love to pick your brain some more and learn so much more about all the psychology behind all of this. But thank you so much for sharing what you have tonight. I've learned some new terms and gained some insights, which I always do when I'm reading what you've written. And so I appreciate you talking with us and sharing all that with us. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to, any last words, anything you forgot to say you wanted to bring up, or advice out there for post-Mormon parents?
I suffer, I learn, I change. That's my new motto. I love that I can change. I just think that's a beautiful, and you don't know that when you're Mormon. You don't know that you can change your beliefs. I just love it. So I'm just having fun with it and hoping my kids survive my transition. And I mean, you can't predict the future. So just living it one day at a time, just trying to do my new lens. It used to be through Mormonism. My new lens is now just what's healthy, what's mentally healthy, what's emotionally healthy, what's true. I got a tattoo. I can show it to you.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited.
Can you see it?
No. Oh, okay. I can see it now.
Okay.
It's very small.
So it says,
okay, tell me what it is.
It says truth in Sanskrit calligraphy.
Oh, beautiful.
Because truth is it's my, what's true, what's really true. Let's get down to what's truth. And nobody ever gets to take that away from me. Mormons, the Mormon institution took that away from me for 45 years. And I know it's shocking. I love to go to ward stuff or people walking around with my hair pulled up and my tattoo hanging out with my off the shoulder shirt because they're like, oh my gosh, she's so anti. Wearing shoulders.
Really? Oh yeah. You just causing all sorts of trouble with the men there, I guess, with your shoulders hanging out. I love how you're making such a good statement and like normalizing. This is ex, this is post, like we're still good people, and I can wear this and have a tattoo and still be a great mom and a great friend and a great community member. So I love that.
I hope. Yep, that's my hope.
Yeah. And I also love that we can change and that we don't have to have all the answers. And in fact, it's nice to not have to have all the answers anymore.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very liberating. Well, thank you so much again. And I wish all the best for your family. And I know there's still lots of healing and recovery to be done for everybody. So I wish you all the best. And
thank you.
Thank you again so much. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Have a good night.